Okay, right. So, in the last class, we have already discussed spark lines in time series analysis. Today, we will discuss two more kinds of chart: slope chart and control chart. So, the chart that you're looking right now is the slope chart. So, in slope chart, we have two periods of time, as you can see here. We have February and April, and this analysis is based on COVID-19 data set, and I've chose to analyze for two different months so that we get to know, like in the month of February, which countries were on the top ranks in case of confirmed cases versus the companies who are on the top rank in the month of April. Also, what we can see here in this, the slopes, like in this case you can check in month of February, China was on rank number 1 and then it went down at rank number 6 in April. And also what we can see is US was on rank number 9 in February, and it has risen in the rank in April at position number 1. So this also gives useful insights in the dataset. When we want to compare two periods of time, then you should go for the time series analysis. I hope sparklines is already clear to you that we have discussed in the last class. So let's begin with the analysis. How to get this kind of chart? First, uh, we have the dataset here. Just a minute. So this data set is up to April and there are so many records. So these are the columns. We have the province, country, latitude, longitude, date, confirmed, death, and recovered. So let's create this chart here. So firstly, I'm going to drag in the date in the columns. Because this is 2020 dataset, I'm going to extract month out of that. Right. Next, I just want to analyze for 2 months, which is February and April, because this is the meaning of slope chart. We will be displaying the trend in slope, whether it is increasing or decreasing, and that is possible if we select two periods of time here. So I'm going to put this particular pill in the filters, and from there I have selected February and April. Next, I'm going to select sum of confirmed cases like this. So here we have got total confirmed cases for all the countries in the data set in February and in the April. So you can have a look at the slope. Going to widen this. Okay. So next, I'm going to add granularity to this chart. I'm going to select country, put in the detail. Now we can see the slopes for all the countries. Okay. Here. Now here you can see here we have got the confirmed cases, but what we want is we want rank. So let's change this. I'm going to add a quick table calculation and going to add rank. Also, how do we want to compute it? Using country and region. So this messy looking chart is available for us because here you can see we have got ranks. So I need to select some ranks from here. Okay. So in order to filter out some ranks, I'm going to select this measure. I'm going to put this in filter. So here we can see we have got 0 to 22 ranks, right? So I've only kept 20. So we can also click on the show filter option. So we can increase or decrease the ranks from here like this. Okay, next you can see this axis, axis, we want to reverse it because ranks are starting from 0, 1, 2 from the bottom. We want to make it from the top because human eye usually checks the ranks from the top. So I'm going to reverse this axis. Right. Next, I'm going to put country in the label. Next, we are going to put rank. We want to display rank over there. I'm going to edit the label now. Because ranks are already listed over there, I'm going to hide this header. So this is the final slope chart we have got. Any doubts in this? Please write in the chat box. If you have got, okay. To what? Okay. Why we are seeing these marks over there is the reason is that on the this side we are not getting that particular country to which there would be a line, so that's why we're seeing some marks. And maybe this country is not in this range, that's why we're not seeing that line drawn. Okay, that's why seeing those marks, because there are so many records. Right. So this was the second time series, and the third one is the control chart. Okay. So this kind of chart which you can see here on the Tableau screen is called as control chart, another time series analysis. So why we do we call this as the control chart is because we can decide on what are those measure values where we have the control and what are those values which are out of control. So this control chart is created from global superstore dataset, and these are the sales drawn here over the time. Here you can see we have 2012, 13, 14 and 15 data. Moreover, we have analyzed using month. So I've got firstly years in the columns, then we have the months, right? So now we have got four different panes. So this is one pane, second, third and fourth pane. Okay, and what we can see here is the red marks. We have set a threshold, right? So this threshold is basically set according by considering the average plus the standard deviation of the data. Okay, now standard deviation tells us how close our values are to the mean. Okay, we have already drawn the average, means how closer these values are to the average or the mean. It actually shows us the dispersion of the data closer to the mean or the average. So you can see, so all these values, these points lie above the average and these lines lie below the average, and we are set a threshold, and according to that we define that whatever sales are in this threshold in these two bands are in control, and the sales which are outside these bands are not in control. So this kind of chart can be drawn where we have data set in which we want to examine the defects, right, over the years. And what we can check is if the defects lie outside that threshold, it means something has to be done for that, right? So that we can focus on those defects, right, which lie outside this particular threshold, right? So this is the overview of control chart. So let's create one more so that you understand the steps of creating a control chart. Okay, right. So firstly, I'm going to drag in order date, and we are going to select year. That's fine, it's year. Next, I'm again going to select order date and going to extract months. By default, quarters are extracted. So we're going to select month. Next, I'm going to select sum of sales, put in the rows. So we have got this trend. Next, what we want is we want to draw a line which denotes the average of these values across the pane. I want one average line for this pane, this, and this. For that, we need to go to analytics. And here I'm going to select the reference line. And we want to put it across the pane. So here you can see we have got the average line for all these values across the pane. And this is fine. The value is sum of sales average. The label, if you do not want any label, none, you can see there is no label which denotes the average, and the line is fine. Okay, so this line has been decided. Next, I need to decide, we need two more lines, right, which will denote the upper threshold and which will denote the lower threshold, lower boundary, right? For that, we first need to create a calculated field, okay, and then we will create the reference bands. So I'm going to data tab. Here we are going to create a calculated field. So this will be upper boundary. And next, we're going to calculate window average sum of sales plus window standard deviation. Now, window average is a table calculation. Here you can see this is a default table calculation. So it allows us to perform this calculation, what we are mentioning, across the table, whether we want to perform this calculation across the complete table, or we want to perform this calculation across the pane like this, just for 2014, or we want to compute it using a particular cell, maybe for this cell or this cell like this, right? So here we have written window average for the sum of sales. For that we are computing the average, and what we are doing for that is we are adding the standard deviation so that we get this upper boundary, and standard deviation tells us those values which are closer to the range, closer to the mean, right? So we add those to the average to get that upper boundary, because this is upper boundary. If we want to get the lower boundary, for that we need to subtract this standard deviation from the average. Apply this and okay. Right, now we have this upper boundary. Similarly, we will create a lower boundary. This is the final formula: average of sum of sales minus standard deviation of sum of sales. Apply this and okay. So we have got lower boundary and we have got the upper boundary. Now we need to put these two in detail first. Only then we'll be able to add the reference band for this. We want to use these two calculation fields in the chart. So I don't want to put it somewhere in the rows or column. So I want to make this participate. So we will add this in detail. I'm going to put lower boundary and upper boundary. I'm going to put in detail. Here we can check how do we want to compute this. So this allows us to be computed across the table, across the pane, right? So we want to do it across the pane. So I'm going to select across the pane. Next, we need to go to the analytics tab. Here we have the reference band. Reference band allows us to draw a band from to. Okay, we want to draw a band starting from which point to the which point. Okay, so here I'm going to configure this reference band. Firstly, we want to compute it on the sum of sales. No, we want to compute it from the lower boundary value minimum. That's fine. We do not want any label. Next, we want to compute it to the upper boundary that we have decided. And maximum is fine. We do not want any label for this also. Fill, we can change it. If we want to make it more lighter, we can choose a more lighter color, lighter shade. And the line we can choose dashing line or the dark color, and then okay. So we have got these reference bands here. Now let's go back to the data tab here. So I have chosen, okay, here from here I had chosen compute using pane. What happens when we compute this across the table? So what we get is, we for the complete table we get one single band computed for all the values in across the pane. So across the table like this. But this is not what we want. We want to compute these across the pane so that we have different bands for each pane for this year and so on for each and every year. on the tab. Any doubts so far? Anyone's having doubt? I have actually taken that. This one, this is the calculated field that I have created before for my previous sheet. So I wanted to show you how what is the formula for that. So the formula is actually the same in that also. So that's the one that I had created before. Yes. Okay. So this work is done. Next, what we want is I want the marks, like here on the line, I want the marks, and I want to color those marks to be red if those marks are outside this boundary and the lower boundary, outside the upper boundary and lower boundary. For that, first I need to draw one more chart which is just like this. Means I need a duplicate of this chart. I need a dual axis chart. So what I'm going to select is one more sum of sales. I'm going to put it in the rows. Here we have the copy of these two charts. So this is sum of sales number one, this one, and this is sum of sales number two, this one. Okay, this is the chart that I want to keep my primary chart. So I will remove these axes from here. I just want to keep this chart. Next, in this chart, I'm going to choose the chart type as circles. So instead of getting lines, we have got these marks, right? For the same data, instead of getting lines, we have got this. And next, we need to create dual axis. Here we have got it. And whenever we create the dual axis chart, what we do is we synchronize the axis. So both the axes are synchronized now. Okay. Next, we need to color these as red. For that, we need to write a calculated field. We will create a formula for that. For the values which are lying outside this boundary, color those as red and otherwise color as blue. So for that, let's create a calculated field. So this is a final formula. If the sum of sales is greater than upper boundary, so which means these marks, or the sum of sales less than the lower boundaries, these two, then make it as out of boundary, otherwise in boundary. So this is the calculation field. I do not want to add it in the rows or columns. Instead, I want to add it in one of these marks, which is color. You can also do that. You can put a calculated field. It's not required that you need to put it somewhere in the rows or columns. You can also put it here. So we are going to put it in color. I need to put this in the second chart color. So we need to select first the second chart, which is our marks, and I want to color the marks. So going to put it here. Now the marks are colored according to that calculated field. We can also check this color legend here, in boundary and out of boundary. So this is the final control chart, okay, which can tell us which of the sales are in control. We do not need to do much marketing for those, right? In these months, like in this month of September, November, and December, the sales are high, boosted up, that's fine. But when the sales are very less, we need to uh, do some strict marketing in these months in order to boost up the sales. So these kind of insights we can find out from this kind of analysis. Please write if it's this clear. Good. So this topic will also be asked in your CA.